Hi, I'm Garm1, and this is Midgardia's Cool Crowdfunding Show. I'm here today with Tay Curreysmith. How's it going?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So, you're here today to talk about Fight Item Run, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, Fight Item Run is my powered by the apocalypse nostalgia infused um, RPG that's on Kickstarter now. It inspired by the JRPGs and side scroller Metroidvania games of the 90s mainly. I really like those games, like aesthetically, but my dark secret that I have been very readily revealing all the time is that I didn't really play them growing up. I am the youngest of four, so I spent most of my time watching them get played growing up. But that kind of instilled in me this idea of what the games feel like and what it's like to see your brother beat Mega Man and get the cool gun that seemed like the boss that he just beat, and like how cool is that? Um, and just taking those cool inspirations. When I was like 5, 6 years old, I used to make what I called mazes, but they were pretty much just hand drawn side scroll platformer games. And that was probably my first game design. So getting into this game was kind of like a love letter to some of my earliest game design, some of my earliest becoming cognizant of what games like really are in that way that children slowly do.
Right.
But yeah, it's a powered by the apocalypse. Um, at its base, I like to think that I have tacked on some interesting mechanics to it. Um, you go chamber to chamber through dungeons. Of course, I say dungeon, but they can mean anything from, floating cloud kingdoms to, you know, mesas in a desert. Whatever makes sense. Dungeons is kind of the word that felt right. Um, and you have a ton of narrative rules on top of narrative tools on top of the combat rule sort of systems where you can explore affinities, which is the bond you have between other characters, or you can use the cutscene moves to pause, rewind, fast forward, and go into character explorations. And you can go into collaborative storytelling, um, sort of play to find out type of situations where you can just like figure out what the dungeon is all about in the moment.
That's awesome. I also have several fond memories of, various side-scrolling games, good old Metal Slug and all that fun stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and I now spend like 4 hours a day watching a guy play, Kaizo Super Mario World ROM hacks. So, um, yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit about the affinity system?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, so when I was writing the game, this is um, this will be the first powered by the apocalypse game that I published, but I have developed others with the system and just didn't finish those games all the way. You were before the call just talking about the mermaid one that I made, inspired by like that hashtag mermaid from a couple of years ago. That was my first experimentation with powered by the apocalypse, and I didn't get it like fully. Like I will admit that I didn't get it yet. But in the time between then and when I made Fight Item Run, I was able to spend a lot of time, and I'm going to attribute this almost entirely to my time in the online community Off the Table, because they have done some phenomenal Powered by the Apocalypse games and really kind of opened my eyes to the design philosophy behind like the fail forward, the play to find out, the collaborative cinematic sort of storytelling that you can get from that. And I promise I'm getting to the question that you asked. Um, but I writing this game almost kind of became drunk with this power and realization that like everything is a move. Like if you start a sentence with "when," you're pretty much right. You're writing a move. And so I kind of thought about that in terms of what all tools are available to you. And I knew that I wanted to make relationships important, both thematically and mechanically important in the system. So affinity represents that in a pretty integrated way. And at the simplest, they are prompts that when they happen, it triggers a quick reveal. And what that might look like is when you, um, I usually have to stop myself when I try to think of something on the spot because not even I remember my own rules well. So I'm going to pull up my text real quick.
It's the game designer's curse. You've revised it so many times you don't remember which one's the current one.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So one, there's when you help another succeed, learn something that character gains from being in the dungeon or something that drives them. So when you help another character succeed, you get to learn something about that character. Now, there are two options there, and it's up to the other player, the other character's player, to decide which one of those things they're going to reveal to you. And these sorts of prompts can be anything from like what drives them? Justice. And then you go on with the fight because these things can pop up like in the middle of a boss fight, like right as you're, helping them finish off the monsters they're fighting. It's just integrated into the flow of game. Or they can take this opportunity to explore the backstory, explore what their character is doing there, and the players get to invent elements of the dungeon and elements of their story as they go. So when you start off, it's kind of like a low prep. You collaboratively decide your setting. The player who is the DM is going to have probably an idea of what they want the big bad at the end to be, but a lot of those details, including the secret that is built into character creation, is intended to be discovered and revealed along the way. So Affinity gives you a quick and organic way to either throw that out there or take advantage of those cutscene mechanics to explore it a little bit more. Because one of the core cutscene mechanics is if it's important, like if there's an important conversation that's happening right now and you want that to happen instead of combat, combat will pause for you because that's how it worked in the old video games. Like if there is the dialogue for the boss, like you didn't just get to run up and hit the boss. You read through the dialogue, you watched the cutscene. Um, it wasn't until later that you got skip buttons. Uh, so Affinity is that opportunity to explore those elements. And then it is mechanically significant because it gives you a bonus in the moment, or it. So in that situation, you're helping the character. You provide a bonus is like just a +1 forward to the next thing that they do because it is a bond that is helping them. And you also get to keep track of the number of these instances that happen. Once you reach 5, your affinity with them crystallizes into a new piece of gear, and you get a cool new item that represents like the bond between you. And then it just cycles back to 0. And so it goes 1 to 5 and clears out. So there's a couple of different elements there that let it keep growing. It sounds like a lot, but there's also text in there that says, if you just want to let this one go because you've helped this person like 10 times in this battle because they can't finish their own monsters, or maybe they've got different priorities. Maybe they're just exploring the dungeon and not even trying to fight the monsters. They're like looking for puzzles and looking for treasure, and then they just keep getting hit. So the fighter is having to jump in there and save their back. You can just choose to skip that affinity. You can say like, hey, I'm not going to act on this one. Or if it's at the end of the scene, because you get a victory theme after each battle where you get a little bit of time to reflect, you can retroactively look back and say, hey, there's that time where we, for example, like
punched a giant skeleton
experienced
to
hard.
death, or yeah.
Yeah, so like one of the options is when you experience hardship alongside another, you can confide in each other something as frightening as it is comforting. So that's one of the affinity prompts. So if you realize in retrospect that you had done this thing together and that could be an opportunity to do an affinity, you can wait until the scene's over and then explore it at that point.
Yeah, and that's the point at which you go, brother, the only time I feel alive is when I'm on the verge of death, or whatever.
Yes. You gotta have snappy dialogue. It's you gotta.
Yeah, also you turn into Hulk Hogan, I guess. That's part of the move, I assume. Uh, that's super cool. I really enjoy just in the general thing of that response, how you've interweaved a lot of the structure of old RPGs into like specifically the structure of this game. It's nice to see.
Yeah, and that was definitely something that was really important to me in designing this, where I was not interested in creating a game that faithfully recreated those old RPGs or those old Metroidvanias, um, but it kind of created the feeling of the type of storytelling that they do. So there's like certain mechanics that I mean, if you look at modern side scrollers, you look at games like it's not even modern anymore, but like Braid everywhere through like Limbo, and I'm playing one on my phone right now called Catbird, which is just like a little like reflex side scroller, and those are so much more innovative, and they have so many more. I mean, they stand on the shoulders of giants. So was not my intention to recreate those old games because they had flaws. The only way I can play them now is on the Switch, where it gives you the little option to rewind when you die. Because I am casual. I am a filthy casual, and I will own it and I will admit it. Uh, but recreating the unique storytelling style that the games have was what was important to me.
Right, and from the sounds of it, you've done an excellent job.
I
Um,
hope so.
this is normally where I would ask either what makes Fight Item Run unique or what inspired you to create this, but I think we've covered both of those quite extensively. Um, can you tell me a little bit about the art design for Fight Item Run?
Oh my gosh, yes. So the graphic designer that I've been working with is Hi, or Mia Mardikian, goes by Hi. And they are such an amazing graphic designer, and they have um, been bringing so much to life on this project. Um, and so I can, send them. Um, like you can go to the Nintendo website and download the game manuals for like Super Metroid or whatever. So I can send them these like, what do you think about this? Like, look at this design, and they'll be like, oh my god, I love it. Like it's so terrible, but it's so great in these specific ways. Like it's such a relic of its time, and so I feel like that conversation has been really strong between us. Um, and they were the one that recommended Brian Wolf to me, and I think they worked kind of like tangentially on some related projects before, um, and so I Brian they also did. Oh, I feel so bad for blanking on it. It was a board game on Kickstarter, I think a couple years ago, and I remember thinking it looked super cool, but I was very broke at the time, so I wasn't able to back it. But it was like a grid-based fighting game, board game, where it was kind of like Super Smash Bros. Style, where you try to knock people back off the board. And it has such a brilliant pixel art, graphic design to it that when I recommended Brian, they said like this artist, hits the style that you're going for. So I took their word for it and reached out, and then Brian was totally on board. Now, what Brian's been doing with so they did um, the pixel art that's on the cover, the couple of characters fighting the dragon, and then I put that into the black frame with the geometric colors, which was very much inspired by the old cartridge style of like Super Nintendo. Um, And when I sent Brian some reference, I was like finding those old like what is it, like Ghosts and Goblins and other sorts of like sword and sorcery really bad RPG art of like, I love this where it's like the one standing with the sword and you kind of see over their shoulder and that's the hero and the big monsters in the background. And they just really ran with it. And then I set that into that frame, so it was very evocative of like, oh, this would be on a cartridge that I would pick up. And then what Brian's been doing with the art is just incredible. I don't think I've shared this piece yet, but maybe we'll have posted by the time this interview comes out. But one of the notes I had was for the character class of Swordbreaker. And the Swordbreaker's deal is they are able to wield two handheld items, which are commonly weapons, but they can be other stuff. And their combo special is when they can hit like super hard, but there's a risk of breaking their weapon when they do that. And gear is pretty important, so breaking it is a high risk. So I did this, and it wasn't until like the second or third time I was looking at the art that they sent, and this character has this cool big sword, and that was kind of one of the things that I had mentioned that the character could carry. But then I realized there's a band-aid on the sword, and I didn't think about it at first. I was thinking, like Kingdom Hearts. What did they like? The Cloud had the wrapped up Buster Sword, so I didn't really like think about it too much. I was like, oh, it's because the Swordbreaker breaks their weapons that they put a band-aid on the sword because they hurt it. And that attention to detail, that humor, and that like that extra step. I'm just so happy to be working with Brian. And from there, like uh, they have been nailing that style of art that you get from those game manuals when all you can see is the pixel sprites. So you go into the book and flip through. It's like, oh, that's what the monster actually is supposed to look like. The bright, saturated kind of like Saturday morning cartoon vibe, and I'm living for it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the board game you were thinking of is called Tiny Sword Smash, apparently.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Welcome. Also, if you really like questionable old RPG art, you should look at Shining Force. You can get centaurs with bazookas. It's awesome.
Is this a newer game that kind of
Oh no, this is
plays on those themes?
old. It's like Genesis era.
Shining Force
Yeah, I watched
video
one.
game series.
Yeah, it's a whole series. I've only seen a playthrough of the first one. One of my buddies played through it on Twitch. I hope he does the
Oh
rest.
yeah, so this Sega Mega Drive cover of the dude fighting the skeletons may have been one of the covers that I sent to Brian as an example of like that art style. This is exactly what, um, yeah, this is exactly the genre that I was talking about.
Yeah, it's a very like archetypal old school RPG in pretty much every way. It's neat, and also Centaur with bazooka. How can you go wrong, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's excellent. That's art right there.
So, you mentioned the Swordbreaker. What other classes do you have in Fight Item Run?
Yeah, so there are 8 classes, and there are three. I think there are 3 slots on Kickstarter now where you can pledge a dollar amount. That is an amount that I'm going to look up right now, where you can design, or I will work with you to design um, playable classes that will go in the core book. They'll be printed right alongside all of the other ones. Um, yeah, select your fighter. It's that $250 tier. Um, there are,
One
holy
left. Yeah.
goodness, there's one left. Oh wow, as of our recording of this. So I am sorry if I have teased this option for you and it turns out to not be available by time you listen. Um, but there are 8 different classes, and I tried to play on both archetypes that you would see in games like this, as well as things that I just thought were neat. Um, there are 4 base stats in the game, and they are DMG, DEF, ACC, and SP. And when people ask me what those stand for, I say no, that's it. Those are the stats. It's just def. And like, yes, it's damage, it's defense, it's accuracy, and it's special. But like that was one of the things that I love about those old games. You get into the game and it's just got abbreviations and it never explains what the abbreviations are for. And it becomes this language that you become familiar with after game. But like the first time you look at them, it's like I don't know what these letters mean. So damage is your like ability to deliver force. Defense is kind of like a combination of like running away as well as defending and healing. So it's kind of just your general defensive stat as opposed to your aggressive stat. Accuracy comes a lot with item use, item finding, searching, puzzle solving, that sort of stuff. And then special is going to deal a lot with magic, and then the draw actions. And draw is where you like draw the essence out of a monster. So once you defeat it, you get an item out of it. And so like I stole the name from, was that Final Fantasy VIII, where you do the draws, but it works just like a little bit differently. And they those four stats kind of started out as the backbone of the 8 classes, where 4 of the classes have a +1 to each, and then the other 4 classes have a +2 and then a -1. So there's a couple of different builds, and each class has a regular special ability. So for the Swordbreaker, it's the ability to have 2 gear items in the handheld slot. The other art that I've shared so far is the Elementalist, and their bonus is +1 special. Swordbreaker gets +2 damage, but -1 stat that I'm about to look up. And the Elementalist, their deal is that they can use elemental magic tags. So when they do an item or when they do an action, they can say like, I attack them and it's fiery, or like I use a water wall to defend. And that allows them to use a little bit of extra flavor. -1 accuracy for the Swordbreaker.
Right.
For the Elementalist, that kind of plays into one of the other themes that was really important to me for game design here, which kind of comes from. So I've been super digging Lancer, and unfortunately, I have not been able to play it yet. A group of friends and I have had like this Lancer campaign pretty much playing. We've been building our character since before the Kickstarter, or like during Kickstarter, and we'll play it eventually, right? It's one of those games. But I really, really, really love what they did and their approach to the best of both worlds game design, where you have the crunchy, grid-based, tactical mech combat section, but when you're out of the mechs, you have the cinematic, lightweight pilot kind of interactions. And I thought that was a really, really interesting approach. For Fight Item Run, I kind of wanted to try what the opposite would look like. And I just really wanted that idea of flavor and crunch to be inseparable. And I've kind of been alluding to it so far, and I think Affinity is a good example of it. But the simplest kind of representation of it too is the Elementalist, where by making a case for, and this is how a lot of the gear works too, by making a case for, I'm going to use fire to attack this plant monster, that then becomes better. Like you get a bonus to attacking this, or you say that, this air magic lifts me up, and that's how I can hit the flying monster, and it gives me an edge there. And it encourages creative problem solving as your tactics, and less of the more traditional tactics, which, like, I love a good war game, And I don't want to knock those like tactical grid based, but a lot of them I'm not very good at them, so I like to come up with. I think when I played Exalted, um, I had a character who played a shamisen, an instrument, and he could make people go like mad and bleed through their ears with his haunted music. It was like the villain campaign or whatever, and I was so proud of this character. I didn't realize that Exalted is not a game that really encourages you to play your weird oddball characters. In the very first scene of the very first game that we played together, my character was cut in half. The first roll of the game pink misted my character, cleaved him in twain, and I was crestfallen. The GM kind of rolled back a little bit, like, okay, so your character didn't actually die. We're gonna say he can still be alive. Go ahead and redesign him a little bit so he is not completely squishy. And it's like, oh, okay, there's an optimum strategy here. So for Fight Item Run, I kind of wanted to encourage this thing where while handheld gear is thought to be weapons, some of the examples I have are like just like a set of wind chimes. And that plays off the RPG thing where um, you got Cloud with his giant sword, and you've got Barrett with his gun arm, and then you've got Tifa just punching and kicking, and they're all running up, hitting the same tank, hitting the same giant monster, dealing the same damage. And I think Final Fantasy VIII is great like that because you end up with I'm going to lose all my nerd cred because I've only ever seen my wife play Final Fantasy VIII. I've never played it myself, so I don't remember what items they use. I guess one of the games that I was really inspired by is called Shadow Hearts, which is a weird action RPG that I rented from Blockbuster when I was a kid. And they had a character who was like a wrestler, and his whole deal is he would find things that were vaguely column-like, and he would pick them up. So it was like a mailbox or like a totem pole, or like just he would just like look at it, and you'd have this little cutscene where it's like, yeah, I can use this as my weapon, and he just picks it up, and you have this thing, and it's wild. So I love that. I love that. So if your character uses a set of wind chimes, it's not because it's the optimal weapon. It's because it's part of that character's aesthetic. It's that character's battle animation. It's that cool sequence you see when they gain their full burst drive and they get to do their super attack. Because yes, I needed a limit breaker mechanic in here, so I put one in here.
Yeah, or like Kanji Tatsumi in or yeah, Kanji Tatsumi in Persona 4, starts the game beating the shit out of people with a school desk. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, like you see that so often where I think there was just so many games rolling around where they wanted their characters to be unique. So you get like the character was like, I don't know, this one fights with wrenches. Like Red 13 has combs, right? Like it's you can have the cool character like Titus and his ball. Um no, was it Titus? Oh my god, who just fought with the ball? Just
Uh,
kicked the ball at people. Or is that oh my god, losing all my cred. Anyway.
yeah, I haven't actually played many Final Fantasy games, so I'm no help there. All I know
Okay.
is suplex a train.
Yes, and yes, I did make a suplex a train reference in the text of Fight Item Run.
Good. That puts the fight item part of it somewhat more literally, huh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cheap
I
puns.
realized by yes, a good one. I realized by this part of the interview, I should probably explain why a lot of times I'm looking down, and that is because my cat Sebastian is sitting on my lap. So I'm gonna and then
Uh,
yeah,
what
um,
an incredibly good boy.
he is a very good boy. I don't think he liked being picked up like that very much, but
Not
he's just gonna
particularly.
go right back to sitting on my lap. So yeah, I'm just cuddling him down here. So that's what that body language is.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, if anytime I see like an animal in the background of the interview, I usually try and find out its name by the end of it.
Hmm. You
Um,
gotta.
you gotta, dogs and cats are good, and I guess other animals too. But yeah, this seems really cool. As somebody who has a fondness for older games, even though I don't play them as much as I should. I just play, Red Dead Redemption 2 all the time. Uh, I'm glad to see this. Is there any other element that you'd like to highlight in Fight Item Run?
Um, well, I think you touched on an interesting idea, which is the idea of you like the old games, but you don't play them as much as you'd like to. And I think that's very true for me as well, where I really like the aesthetic, but if I were to actually quantify the number of hours that I put into playing these games, it would be embarrassingly small. But I think that that's okay because we do still love these games. They are such an important part of like the cultural phenomenon. And as I mentioned with some of the newer side scrollers and some of the newer games out there doing cool stuff, they are very much built on the shoulders of these giants. So this is kind of like a love letter to that, not just the number of hours that you might have put into a game, but that feeling you get thinking about these games and imagining yourself in a world as colorful and interesting as these worlds were. Um, okay, I've got a cat walking past a microphone, so that's probably some good Foley there. Um, yeah, fight. Yeah, it's a fun game, and I hope people are into it. Um, One of the things that I'm thinking about doing is actually running a game jam. I've played a handful of RPGs, and I have found that there's a lot of value in the one shot where like we just want to try this game. And the more time that I spent in and around Fight Item Run, I realized that it has many strengths, and I'm not a speed runner. So I don't myself know how to make this game a speedrunning game. Those old school RPGs and even like the side scrollers that are supposed to be short, I spend a lot of time in them because there's a lot of exploration, there's a lot of story. So this game is very campaign forward. It is built in a way that is most rewarding when you can spend time exploring in it. So I was thinking about doing a game jam to be like hack this game up, try to make a speedrun version of it, try to make the like the throw down your materials at a con and play it in 2 hours with a bunch of strangers. Um,
I mean, that game.
and
That
I
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, and I think that's just like the beauty of Powered by the Apocalypse, that it comes in with a certain base level of familiarity. And even though I've like tacked on some other stuff to it, yeah, I like the idea of the mod hack community. I mean, both video games and role playing games coming in and just exploring and taking things apart and seeing how it's going to work for them.
Yeah. Spencer Campbell, the guy behind Slayers, did a game jam for Slayers, just before it came out, or as it was coming out, I guess. And that worked really well for him. There's a ton of really cool content out there for that, so it's definitely a viable idea.
Oh yeah, I caught that. I thought that was a brilliant idea. I'm definitely stealing it. I mean, I'm inspired by it. That's what we call it when we want it to sound good.
Right, right, right. Paying homage. Uh, well, yeah, this looks like a great project, and I cannot wait to see it fully completed.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm excited about it too. I was blown away by the support and stuff. I was sharing out previews ahead of time, and people were clicking with it, and it kind of made me realize like, oh, maybe there's something here. And then my little humble brag is so I'm an essential worker in these COVID times. So I'm having to go into my branch at work every day. I launched this campaign on my first morning break of the day. And by my lunch break, when I hopped on my phone to see how it was doing, it was already funded. And that's a dream come true.
Nice. Well, Tay, it's been wonderful talking to you. Any last
Thank you
words?
so much.
Any last elements you'd like to highlight? Anything like that?
No, but I will say that if you give me more room to talk, I will just keep talking. So if this episode needs to be over, just we're good. I'm a rambler. I'm a rambler.
I think we covered the main points of it. I mean, if you want to do a part two sometime, we totally can.
I will always talk. Yeah, just let me know. Just let me know.
All right. Well, for now, thank you very much for coming on. You've been enjoyed to talk to.
Thanks for having me.
And for those of you watching at home, have a good night.